Hi, welcome back to COM110. We're going to be talking today about culture and more specifically chapter 6. So I hope that you've had some time to read this chapter. I think that this is a great chapter because we're able to look at our culture and we're able to think interculturally, how we can talk to other people and thinking about, our values and beliefs and everything we grew up with. How is that going to impact the way we communicate with each other? The way that we make relationships with each other, but then also just being more open minded. I do want to stress that this chapter, we just briefly go over this concept. There's an entire course here that focuses on intercultural communication. So please know if you're reading this chapter and you're like, hey, I'm kind of into this, there's an entire class that we can talk about with this topic. So please definitely check that out. So let's get into it. So, thinking about cultural and environmental factors, I want you to think about the minute we're born into a culture. And maybe some cultures are more celebrated than others, but this unique cultural environment, that's what's going to surround us into thinking who we are, the type of person we want to be. It says here it's an ingrained part of who we are, and we don't even really realize it until we meet other cultures a lot. And so here's a definition for culture, and it says a group of people through which a process of learning can share perceptions of the world. Thinking then, how's that going to influence my beliefs, my values, my norms, and then like the rules that I follow? I do want to say that your book really emphasizes that scholars, communication scholars specifically, had a really hard time figuring out one definition for culture. So this is the one we're focusing on in this book, but please know that and when you get into this a little deeper, how do other definitions kind of differ or look the same? Now with culture, you want to think first off, because there's a lot to process here with that definition. I totally get that. So first off, you're going to start off with a group of people. It needs to be a group of people that are all like kind of believing the same things and they're all under the same guidelines. And with our culture, we learn about it. Someone is going to teach us. And so that's why it's so important thinking about older generations, how they share stories with you, they pass on the torch. That's why it's important to think we learn through them who we are and what's important to us. And what we learn, yeah, it is going to ultimately shape the way we look at the world, of course. And thinking it's going to leak into our beliefs, our values, and our rules and our norms. So I keep saying beliefs, values, norms, and rules. It's like, what are these? So our beliefs are these assumptions we have thinking about, okay, what do I think is true, right? Do I believe in Bigfoot or do I not? And then I look into my culture, I look to the people that I'm surrounded by and see, hey, they all believe this, right? You might think that some people have different beliefs in like what your purpose in life is. Is it to go to school or is it to have a family? And so this is just ingrained in us and kind of celebrated within who's around us. Now, this also goes into values, thinking what's important, what are these principles or standards that we hold up? Do we value education or do we value, having children, procreating, family lifestyle? Now, these norms, this is important. They're informal guidelines. That's the big part here. You got to know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's normal within my culture. Now, rules, these are the explicit guidelines. I think about them as the formal guidelines, Yeah, they are usually written down, rules that people follow. You can think about religion, how we have like the 10 Commandments in some religions. That's written down, and that is a guideline that people follow very strictly. I think when we follow these rules, this is what I think is social. This is what I think is acceptable and what's proper in our world. This is, excuse me, this is one of my favorite things about cultures. And it's that, yeah, we can be born into this main culture, but then we have co-cultures that we see and we become part of because that's who our identity is. And so co-cultures, it can be regional. You can think they're going to be based off of economics, maybe social, religion, ethnics, and then also cultural groups that maybe just have any kind of influence on society. So I did give you the example of like the Ten Commandments in the last slide, and we can argue that that culture is, maybe a co-culture than religion, right? We have some examples here, and your book talks about, let me see it real quickly. It talks about like, the Amish culture. We also have the LGBTQIA plus culture, Catholic. You want to be careful with all of these because let's say on campus, you're part of one of these co-cultures, and the way that our campus celebrates it might be different than a different campus out there, right? And so we can't just assume that just because you're part of, your religion is Catholic, not everybody does it the same way. So they're not all identical, although they kind of have a lot of the same shared values and beliefs. We got to be really careful though here to avoid overgeneralizing individuals based off of cultures they belong to. We're all unique individuals. And yeah, we might have similarities if we're in the same cultures or co-cultures, but don't generalize here. Don't think the same for every single person. They do bring a unique sense of history and a purpose within our larger culture than what's accepted, what's not. Check this out. You are part of a microculture. So I know we're getting real like nitpicky now. Culture, co-culture, microculture. And this one is kind of referred to, I want to let you to remember this as a local culture, what is happening around you in your local environment. And so it's influenced off of these cultural beliefs. We have values, norms, again, rules based off of an organization. I look at SCC and I look at our daily 10 a.m. RD walk as a perfect example of a microculture. We're trying to build community and we are trying to get to know each other in this like 1 mile walk, right? Talking to people, promoting communication, promoting interpersonal relationships. And so through this talk or through this walk, we're able to talk with this local culture. Now, no, people outside of SEC, they're not typically invited to these things. They could come though, right, if they know about them. But this is typically a time for us to promote communicating and us being together. You can see that it does exist within a small segment of people within a specific geographic location. So thinking of all of Scottsdale, for example, they're not all invited, but just SCC. This is a place where we can belong with one another and just have that like sense of, community. We do have an example from your book that if you've ever been to Disneyland, they don't refer to their employees as employees. They refer to them as cast members. And that is their microculture of trying to promote a different work style and just their own, key terms and their own recognition of each other. All it is a sense of belonging, and we all want to be belonged, right? Alrighty. I know I'm hitting you with a lot of key terms here, but these are going to be all based off of different like self-esteems and different esteems that we feel thinking about our cultures, co-cultures, and microcultures. So first off, the first one's pretty important to think about, and this is your collective self-esteem. It's your own individual self-worth, maybe your self-image, thinking about how you interact with people and how you evaluate people and yourself through these different social groups. It's just like your overall self-esteem. Now we get a little bit deeper here, and we can think about private collective self-esteem. This one is looking at an individual, so just me, how I positively evaluate my group. I can think about my culture. Do I feel happy about my culture? Do I feel happy about my co-culture? All of that. So you can see some moments where maybe society and the news, they shine light on a different culture in maybe a negative way. You might not feel happy about that. You might feel negatively about that. And so you're not experiencing private collective esteem because this one focuses specifically on positive. I wish it focused on both, but it's just how positive you view your own culture. Now, membership esteem is the degree to which you see yourself as being a good member. Perfect example is that if you are pretty proud of your religion and you go to church every single Sunday, maybe you go to Bible study throughout the week and you're always there, you're always active, you feel pretty good. You're like, hey, my membership is like strong here and my esteem is good here. Now you might think, like on the other end, maybe life just gets busy. You can't go to church on Sunday, maybe miss, Bible study. And so you haven't been there for a while. Your membership esteem, you're not going to feel very good about it because you're not actively participating. You can still be a member, but you're just not actively there, right? Now, our public collective self esteem here. This looks at how people who are not within your group, it says non members, they can evaluate that group either positively or negatively. I think a great example and something that's happening in our society today or our culture of America is, the new president. We have a new Republican president in there. And so you might think to yourself, if I'm a Democrat, how am I going to evaluate, this new Republican Party coming in? Am I going to look at it positively or am I going to look at it negatively? And that's that public collective of like trying to understand what's good, what's bad, even though I'm not part of it. And then the last one is importance to identity. This is the degree to which a group membership is important to an individual. So I told you the co-culture of LGBTQIA+. And some people, part of that community, this is a huge part of their identity. And so other people within that same community, maybe it's not as big, right? So we have differing importance of identity and differing like weight in a sense. When I come into class, I tell you that I'm half Hispanic, half white. My importance there is I want to share this with you, but also maybe there's more to me than just, who I am described as half white, half Hispanic. And so the importance, you put that weight there, you decide what's important there, what's not. Now, thinking about collective self-esteem. So remember, I'm going to go back just for a second to looking at your self-worth, looking at your self-image, and how you kind of interact with others and evaluate other social groups. We go into specific research here. Research has looked at how individuals who, with a collective self-esteem, how it impacts their interpersonal interactions. If you have good self-worth about who you are and where you came from, you're going to have positive interpersonal interactions with others. More specifically, individuals with high collective self-esteem, they're going to have favorable interactions with people outside of their culture. So I think that's great. If you have a good sense of self-worth and about your culture, you're going to be able to talk to other people outside of your culture, connect with them, and just have an overall favorable interaction. That's what we're working towards with communication competence, right? Alrighty, let's talk a little bit about stereotyping. We can't not talk about this when it comes to culture. And we have to kind of really rewire our brains to stay away from stereotyping. Now, yes, your book does say, and I have it here highlighted, not all stereotypes are necessarily wrong or bad, but I think we're kind of generalizing over here of an entire group, of an entire type of person. And so stereotypes, here's their definition, they're a set of beliefs about a personal attributes of a social group. They can be possessed by a larger cultural group, but thinking about how maybe they don't share that same belief within their cultural group. I know that seems kind of like a lot to take in, but I want you to think that personal stereotypes, those are the ones that we hold about a person or maybe a group. That's not really going to reflect that entire group just because we're upset with one single person. Now, stereotypes, they can cause problems. I want to still focus on this a little bit more. We categorize people in snap judgments. And if we're able to rewire our brains to not do so, to not be so judgmental, that's going to really help in understanding people have different group memberships and that's okay. Let's understand them. Let's get to know them and let's celebrate ours with them. I really want us to stay away from stereotyping, from trying not to do it. I know it's hard if we're making snap judgments, but I think that if we're able to practice like mindful communication, when it comes to different cultures, that's going to really help us. Now, we do have ethnocentrism, and this is truly one of my favorite words I've ever learned about communication, period. This looks at how my individual views of the world, my own culture's perspectives, I'm always thinking about that in the lens when I'm evaluating other cultures. Now, I have a great example. I was fortunate enough to go to Italy when I was an undergrad to study for a month. And when I was there, they don't really have ice. And I'm one of those people who, man, I love to stuff my cup with ice. The more ice, the better. I love my iced coffee. And when I started to realize that Italy doesn't have ice on like the second or third day, I kept thinking, that's so weird. Like we have ice, it's so easy to make and all of that. But I'm being ethnocentric here because I'm saying, like, well, my drink is not as good in Italy because I don't have ice. And so you can kind of see here, like, it says these are often accompanied by feelings of dislike, mistrust, maybe hate. And so there's much, much more deeper, discriminatory feelings towards being ethnocentric with another culture. But we gotta be careful of that. Just because you do it a certain way and someone else does it a different way, is one of us right? Is one of us wrong? And why do we have to compare? We can make evaluations. We can share, like, oh, I do it like this, but don't think like, hey, this is weird, right? Now we tend to judge on culture as what we've been taught, and we normally think that our culture is right, moral, or ethical. I really thought this was interesting that your book said that patriotism, that's a mild form of ethnocentrism. We're thinking if you're here from America, that this is like the best land out there, everyone decked out in their red, white, and blue, showing that we're the best country out there. And it's like we're trying to think that we're right, we're moral, we're ethical. Probably, a lot could be said here. I chose a picture back here because I don't know if I've shared this yet, but I am a huge San Diego Padres baseball fan. I'm originally from San Diego, and so I love the Padres. And when you think about sports teams, and more specifically their fans, people get really intense with this. And I admit I get intense with being a Padres fan. So you can see the picture. There's a couple Padres players right there under the title, but everyone else around them are Dodgers fans. I'm sorry to say if you're a Dodgers fan, but like Padres and Dodgers fans do not get along. LA versus San Diego, right? They're so close to each other. There's a real big rivalry here. And so there was this one specific game. I won't get too much into it, but the culture of it being like, oh my gosh, there's San Diego Padres fans here. And there was some drama. If you want to Google it, Profar, the player here, he gave someone a ball and then they threw it back and then they started throwing trash. All of this. And so I look at this is a culture. This is a culture, of San Diego fans going to LA. Maybe Dodgers fans will go to San Diego for the games, and how we communicate with each other and how we think my team is better than your team and all this stuff. It's a mild form of being ethnocentric, but we just have to think like careful with the dislike, the mistrust, the hate, and no one's right or wrong. The Padres are always right. I love them so much. Alrighty, this is the last thing I'm going to talk to you about. And it's how can I improve my intercultural communication skills? You can think about these four different cultural intelligences. That's the CQ. And so first off, we have cognitive, and it's got to involve you knowing about different cultures, being aware that different cultures do things differently. That's okay to kind of like look it up and think about it. When I went to Italy, I could have looked up like, what did they do differently here than in Arizona, right? I know it seems very like easy to do so, but it's amazing what you can find on the internet, right? Now we get to motivational CQ, and that's your desire to engage then in that intercultural interaction. We learn about this, and so let's actually put it to use. Talk to people about it. Our motivation is to get to know more about it. Now, our metacognitive, that's being consciously aware during these interactions. So when you're in those interactions, being aware of like Some cultures don't like eye contact, so maybe I shouldn't do eye contact. Some cultures, really engage in a lot of like holding each other's arms while you're talking. How can I do that, right? Just thinking and like constantly asking yourself, am I being appropriate here? And then lastly, what is your behavior going to be like? Behaving in that manner that's consistent and like putting it to use, right? So it starts off with you wanting to know about it, you kind of engaging in it and thinking, what should I do here? And then doing it. Cool. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. I know it's a little bit of a shorter chapter, but really focusing on culture, really focusing on being just open minded and like ready to talk to other people, right? We want to be good communicators, and this is how we can do that. Hope you have a good day. I'll see you later.